Hi everybody, it's me Tammy Devine here on CCN Sunrise. With me today is Dr. Robert C. Newman II. We'll call him Dr. Newman. Thank you so much for being here today. You were a candidate for governor.
Yes.
Why did you feel it was important to run?
First of all, and we'll move more into this later, it actually is a God call. I didn't look at it and say it's time, things are bad enough, that somebody needs to rescue California. That was not my position. I think we need a godly basis for running this state, and for that reason, and being biblically oriented in terms of how to do things, that I decided that it was time to apply those principles to government.
Okay, so some people might say, well, if God called you to be governor, but you lost in the primary, how can that be?
God works in strange ways.
Yes, He does.
Somebody might have said that prior to me making that statement.
I think so.
But there is another election, 2022.
Okay.
So people will have another opportunity to wake up and make a reasoned decision about a candidate, rather than basing it on emotion or how one combs one's hair, based on principle, record, and sound reasoning.
Okay. Well, you wrote a book. This is My Journey, My Stand. And here you talk about that call to run for governor. And you talk about some of your stances, I think, your beliefs, your Christianity. And you apply that, your Christianity, to your candidacy, to the platforms that you ran on for governor, including being pro-life. Is that right?
That is correct.
So a lot of people are like, there should be separation between church and state. You cannot use your Christianity to run, and to be in charge of government. How do you reply to that?
I reply by saying that there is religion as people define religion. That is the practice on certain days of the week. My belief in Jesus Christ as my Lord and Savior is who I am, even here as we sit together. It is 24/7. It's not relegated to a particular form of worship or a particular day of the week. And so I apply those principles that I have learned in reading the Bible to my daily life, to my relationships, to my emphasis in life.
And part of your belief for being pro-life is also rooted in Christianity. Is that right?
Well, certainly that's right, but it's also rooted in my background. My bachelor's degrees are in chemistry and in zoology. And I know genetics, and I know cell biology, and I know that DNA could only be a human being, and that life begins at conception. But I am not just pro-life in the sense of dealing with the developing embryo, but also throughout life, sanctity of life, that we must have a reverence for the elderly and their contribution to life. We can't just say they've outlived their usefulness and we need to get rid of them.
So life from the cradle to the grave, pretty much, or before the grave.
Before the cradle, yes.
Before the cradle and before the grave.
Before the grave.
Having a sanctity of life then, that people have that throughout. Okay. Do you think that being pro-life like that, especially in a state like California, do you think that could work? I mean, because there are so many people who make California blue, who don't believe these things, who are for abortion and even late-term abortion.
I do understand that that's running rampant in California, and I think that we as citizens of the state of California suffer greatly because of bad decisions. You see, as far as I'm concerned, those who made those decisions in the legislature were not terminated in the womb.
Very true.
And so they need to look at that there's a reason, and I think it's a God-given reason, why those of us who survived that ordeal, which was not in place when I was a child, need to realize that life is precious.
Okay.
It's ordained of God.
Let's go back to your candidacy. You did not continue on. John Cox, you ran as a Republican, correct?
That is correct.
Okay, so John Cox got the Republican nomination during the primaries in June, and but you went through the process, and you had some major issues, from what I understand, with the process of being a candidate. Can you talk about one or two of those problems you had?
The reason I've brought this documentation with me,
Look at this big binder.
this actually is one of 3 binders that the Secretary of State's office provides for candidates at an expense beyond the nomination expenses, a few $1,000s, and beyond the expense to have one's candidate statement in the statewide literature, which costs the candidate $25 per word.
Wow.
And we pay for that as well. We file papers on a regular basis with the Secretary of State's office that have no value for the candidate whatsoever and are just a great expenditure of time. In the previous election, filed, because I've been a candidate for governor of the state of California on other elections, that I was fined $1,154 for filing papers late. There was no wrongdoing, an audit, everything, money received, money spent, etc., was entirely according to the rules. I filed some papers late. Well, I didn't, my accountant did, so I was fined for filing them late.
Wow.
That's what the Secretary of State's office does, of no value to the candidate and no value to the voters.
Some people might say, well, it might weed out the less serious ones. What do you think about that?
That's part of the strategy, I truly believe. But a candidate has no idea what he or she is going to be dealing with as a candidate in relation to the Secretary of State's office and the Fair Political Practices Commission. They have no idea what they're dealing with. They have no idea what they're dealing with the 58 counties who all have a registrar of voters and an office representing the voters and other factors. And that brings me to another point that I'd like to share, just by way of education, since I'm emphatic about education and people being informed when they vote, that the counties are to provide for the candidate a copy of the sample ballot in that county to demonstrate that the candidate is actually on the ballot. Only 8 of them out of 58 sent the required documentation to this candidate and did not provide that information to many of the other
Wow.
statewide candidates.
Only 8 out of 58 registrar's offices sent you the documentation that you pay for to
That's
receive.
correct. That's correct.
Wow.
That I was supposed to receive prior to the 5th of last month, voting
Wow.
day. And that's, but you see,
So do you get your money back? I mean, you should get some money back from them, right?
refund. Yes, a refund. But there's a really, my wife loves this story. When I pulled my papers, that's the term, and got sworn in, I didn't need proof of citizenship, I didn't need a driver's license, and I didn't need a marriage certificate to indicate that I am for real. I did not need those documents to indicate that I was a candidate for governor and run in the race.
Wow.
But the other part of it is they required a check that approximated $4,000 to be filed with the Secretary of State, a blank check, not to exceed a particular amount, a blank check.
Wow.
And they never even have the courtesy to notify the candidate about the amount of that final bill.
Wow.
Because you see, when we secure signatures in lieu of the filing fee, we don't exactly know that amount. Because again, the registrar of voters in the 58 counties have not provided the information to the candidate how many qualified signatures they've actually received.
So you might wake up one day and check your bank statement and surprise, it's a lot bigger of a check than what you anticipated writing, huh?
And there's no way to even verify the accuracy of that amount.
Wow.
Because again, there's no real concern about the candidate in most of the ROV offices, Registrar of Voters offices.
So what are you going to do about it, Dr. Newman? Bad things are happening with this.
I'm going to complain on various radio and television programs. We need a qualified, concerned Secretary of State who is not only concerned about the candidate, but also about the voters.
Who do you think that will be? Because we have an election in November.
That is correct. There is no question about who needs to be out and that Mark Musser needs to be in as the Secretary of State.
You think he could do a better job than Alex Padilla right now?
Well, I wouldn't have mentioned that second name, but I also know him, but far better, far better. Here's the illustration. In San Diego County, in the previous election, when our glorious president, what's his name? Donald Trump, when he was elected, 133% of the registered voters in San Diego County voted. 133%. How do you account that?
Yeah, it can't go over 100. It's not supposed to anyway, right?
And when only about 50% of the voters vote anyway. LA County, is West Covina in LA County?
Yes.
That's correct. You know your geography.
Yes, sir. A little bit.
144% of the registered voters voted in that same election. 144%. There were 11 counties in California out of the 58 who exceeded 100%.
Okay, so
Exceeded 100%. And Alex Padilla says everything is just fine in the Secretary of State's office, which oversees the ROVs, and everything is just fine in the ROV offices.
All right.
And that is just not so. So, Election Integrity has filed suit against the Secretary of State for those very serious errors.
all right, well, let's see if something comes out of it in the end, because that tends to be the case. The last question I was going to ask you, Dr. Newman, it was about the future. Like, what do you do now? You know, you're not a candidate anymore. What are you going to do now? And I'm thinking that maybe you should go into consulting to help people who are trying to run for office. Since you've been through the process, you seem to know a lot about it.
Well, I appreciate you recognizing that, but being the modest person that I am, I have no intention of offering my services unless someone contacts me about, and a candidate for Secretary of State who didn't make it to the final two was a very close friend of mine, and he used me as a consultant, and I provided one of these.
So you're not trying to be a paid consultant necessarily, but
no.
What's the future hold
That's
then?
not my call. I think that California is worth an investment of candidates and voters. I continue to do my part, as this station does, informing people about the circumstance in California that needs a great deal of attention.
All right. Thank you very much for talking with me, sir. I really appreciate you coming. Your book again, My Journey, My Stand. People can find it how?
Through Amazon.
Okay, My Journey, My Stand, Robert C. Newman II, Dr. Robert Newman. All right, thank you so much for coming. I appreciate it. It was fantastic to meet you. You opened my eyes to some things, and I love learning new things when I'm interviewing people, so I really appreciate that. Thanks for being here. That's it, guys, for now. Thanks for watching CCN Crown City Network and watching CCN Sunrise, our morning talk show on here. We will see you next time.
Show. I'm your host, Frank Sejas, and with me today is candidate for State Board of Equalization, Rick Marshall. Rick, how are you doing this morning?
I'm doing just well. Glad to be here. Thanks for having me.
And now you have an election that's coming up, right, in November?
On November the 6th, I'll be standing in the top 2 for State Board of Equalization, 3rd District.
And now you're running, and this is going to be you ran for this 4 years ago, correct?
4 years ago, I ran against the incumbent, Jerome Horton. He managed to beat me, but this time it's an open seat, and I'm looking forward to the challenge.
And now you were telling me beforehand that you believe here in California, obviously, there needs to be a change. The politicians that are there might be getting, let's say, a little bit tired, and we can
well,
make some
I'm not
change.
sure I'm not sure they're getting tired. I think they're more authoritarian, and they actually are trying to control us. And I think we need a viable second party, and that's why I'm trying to stand up, because we have a lot of things coming up in the next couple of years, and we need some people to stand up to it. Because if we don't, our housing prices are going to go higher, the rents are going to go higher, California's quality of life is going to go down, and I don't want to see that. I love this state, and I love this country.
And I love California as well. It's
Yes.
definitely a great state. But as you know, you're here today to talk about those property taxes. I mean, they're going up. Prop 13 is obviously something that's a people's initiative to lower property taxes, and it's something that you, myself, our viewers out there are feeling. It's very difficult to live here in California and not have a great paying job.
I agree. It's tough to live on anything less than $100,000 a year in California because of the housing prices, because of the gas prices. I support the repeal of the gas tax. It's going to be on the ballot in November, Proposition 6. I'm opposed to the initiative that was just filed recently to do a split roll on Proposition 13. I am endorsed by the Howard Jarvis Taxpayers Association for this seat, and I want to see us defeat that initiative because I believe it's just the camel's nose under the tent, and that if they get the split roll, then they'll come and they'll raise personal homeowners' property taxes, and housing prices are already too high, the rent is already too high, and we've got to reverse it. And we don't have a lot of voices saying that, and I think it's time that voters stood up and elect some voices that are saying that, and I want to be one of those voices, and I ask for their vote.
And you're obviously running with the Republican Party, correct?
I'm a Republican. I'm a proud Republican. I think that we have the principles, we have the ideas that will help turn California around. I think that over the last 20 years of one-party rule in California, we've seen it go down. Yes, Silicon Valley is doing great, but the average Californian is not. And I saw a survey somewhere for 50% of those surveyed were thinking of leaving California. And I cannot imagine in a state that has such wonderful weather, we have beaches, we have mountains, we have all kinds of things that people would be considering leaving the state. And it can only be one reason. It's that the taxes are too damn high, and so is housing prices.
And you were saying that actually, in that survey that you were looking at, it wasn't even like Republicans or Democrats. It was actually as a whole. The people
50% of those surveyed are considering leaving California. There's more people that vote in this district than vote in governor's races in 43 states in the union. And it's amazing what can happen if people start exiting the state.
And now, okay, so you, if elected, or as we're going in that process, aside from Prop 13, what else are you telling the people that you're going to bring to the table?
Well, thank you. I want them to jump on the Marshall train. First of all, you have to know that the State Board of Equalization is something that very few people know what it does. So if I could just explain a little bit. The State Board of Equalization is the only publicly elected tax commission in the United States. It was created by constitutional amendment in 1879. Our constitutional duty, the first one, was to audit all of the assessors throughout the state and make sure that property taxes are equal, that no one is getting a better deal than anybody else, that everybody's paying the same price. In fact, the voters of LA County had an opportunity to see that in action about 5 years ago when our assessor, John Noguez, was giving preferential tax assessments to his friends and campaign contributors. It was a State Board of Equalization auditor that found that, and he's being prosecuted by the Los Angeles County District Attorney's Office now. Unfortunately, the wheels of justice turn slow, and he still hasn't been held accountable. But he was turned out of office. We have a new assessor. We want to make those changes, but what you need to know is we have a corruption problem, and it's statewide.
And this is what you want to go in.
I want to go in,
help
and I
with.
want to clear that out.
And that election, unfortunately, obviously, we're running out of time. But with that, Rick Marshall is here to tell you that November 6th coming up, he'll be part of that ballot. Only one other opponent to go for the State Board of Equalization position here in the state of California.
And voters need to understand that my opponent is ethically challenged, and if they take a look at the LA Times, they'll see why, but he's under investigation as well. We can't clean up the corruption if we elect someone else who has that same problem.
And with that, if they want to find you on Facebook or on
They can go
any
to
website?
grickmarshall.com is my website. They can go to grickmarshall on facebook.com/grickmarshall. They can find me there. I would encourage you, if you want to get in contact with me, text me your email address to this number you see here.
Well, thank you, and thank you very much for that. I'm sorry, we would like to have you back in the future, if we can, here on CCN, and thank you for all of you for watching the show this morning. Rick Marshall, thanks again.
Hello everyone, it's me Tammy Devine for CCN Sunrise. I'm here today with a very special guest. We're still talking elections. This is the midterms after all, and we're going to be talking to a number of local candidates as well as some national candidates. And with me today is Konstantinos Roditis. Oh my gosh, I butchered it.
No, you got it right.
So you say your name and you're running for controller, is that correct?
Yes, my name is Konstantinos Roditis and I'm running for California State Controller.
Okay, I was pretty close. So why did you want to run for this office?
Well, I wanted to run because the controller is the chief financial officer of the state, and as being a CFO myself, I see the economic issues and problems that the state has, the regulatory authority, the taxing authority, and the policies that are advocated by the current controller.
So CFO of what?
A CFO of multiple different corporations. I've had from transportation to manufacturing to properties, a whole host. I call myself a entrepreneur, so wherever I can make money, I'll do it.
So explain the difference for everyone out there between the treasurer and the controller, because John Chang used to be the controller, and then he ran for treasurer, is that right?
He's a current treasurer.
He's a current treasurer.
Yes. So the difference is between that you want to think of the treasurer is really the banker for the state. So as tax dollars are going into the state coffers, it's a responsibility of the treasurer, the issuance of bonds, more on the credit rating. Now there is a lot of overlap also where they sit on the pension boards, for instance, of CalPERS and CalSTRS. But the controller is the chief financial officer, so therefore they're kind of the person who's a taxpayer watchdog. They sign all the checks. So their responsibility is to make sure that there's no waste, fraud, and abuse. And that's why the controller has independent audit authority, and as well as being able to hold payments when something doesn't comply with state law. So they're watching over state funds, and that can be on the state level, but on the county, on the city level. If you remember the city of Bell, after that whole scandal broke through,
that was a big old scandal.
The controller's office came in and started investigating because even cities utilize state funding. So that's the difference really between both positions.
I see. So you said, I think the main thing you said there was you want to make sure there's no waste, fraud, and abuse.
Correct.
As the controller, correct? And so we're talking California here. So I'm guessing that there's quite a lot of that.
Yeah, I think one of the best examples is the high-speed rail. We looked at when we approved it as voters in 2008 under Prop 1A. It was supposed to be approximately $35 billion. We're supposed to only pay about a third of the entire cost of the high-speed rail. One third was from the federal government, one third from private sector. Well, federal government isn't giving any money. Excuse me. The private sector has never given any dollars. The federal government has stopped. we went from 800 miles a track to 520, up to 220 miles an hour to up to 110 with about about 1/3 of the rail will have speed restrictions. So we're creating a non-high-speed rail that's estimated to cost now up to $100 billion, and it'll probably go higher than that.
Part of why, and I know it can be a partisan issue, I know you're running as Republican for this, and
Yes.
so a lot of the Republicans have been totally against that. They call it, it's part of the reason why people, and mainly Republicans, I think, call it,
A boondoggle.
Moonbeam's boondoggle, right? And like the high-speed train to nowhere, I think, because these costs keep ballooning, but the services that they're promising keep going down, right?
Correct. And besides that, if you have to take a look, if it was so wonderful the private sector would invest into this, well, private sector is investing in multiple different types of high-speed transportation, like the Hyperloop that SpaceX and Virgin are investing in. There's a thing called the Skytran that's also being near here at a NASA facility that's being tested with private funds. So we already know from the high-speed rail, from our own estimates, it won't even help traffic congestion by 1%. And then the ticket was supposed to be about $50 from LA to San Francisco. Now they're estimating at $186.
Okay, I want to close with this, because when people talk money and finances and numbers and controller and treasurer, people's eyes start glazing over and they're like, what does this have to do with me, right?
Yes.
So what does it have to do with the regular person out there?
Well, it's because the controller is a chief taxpayer watchdog. If you believe that there should be somebody who's diligently watching how the politicians spend money, then you need somebody who's going to be upfront and honest. And that's why part of my pledge has been that I don't take any lobbyists, PAC, special interests, no union money, not even corporate money.
Where's your money going to come from?
My money comes from just hardworking taxpayers, grassroots individuals who want to contribute to the campaign, and that's how we've been funding this campaign.
And it's kind of sad to have to ask that question, right? Because I think we're so used to in politics that money is just flowing in from all these different other places, but it makes you beholden, I think, sometimes as a candidate to those people,
and I
right?
wouldn't be even if I did take that, but I want to send a clear message that this makes me distinctive from my opponent who takes that money. And
Who's your opponent?
My opponent is Betty Yee, the current controller.
Okay, all right. So tough to unseat an incumbent.
Yes, but I think we can, and we're starting to make headway. So I believe in November 7th we'll have a new controller-elect.
All right, well, you've told people why they should vote for you, I think, because you'll be different there. How can they find out more about you?
Well, if you want to learn more about me, Konstantinos Roditis, for controller, you can go to my website, cacontroller.com.
Okay, yeah. It's probably better to have that website than your name. Sorry to say, because I think that would be tough for people.
As a CEO, I understand marketing, and I know Roditis is kind of hard to spell. So
what is it again?
cacontroller.com. So
cacontroller.com.
As in California, as CA. Yes.
Well, your name will certainly stand out on the ballot. It'll be the longest one, I think.
Yes, it will.
So maybe that'll work out too. Thank you so much for talking to me today, Konstantinos.
thanks for having me.
Very nice to meet you, and good luck to you on your race. All right.
Thank you.
And that's it for now here on CCN Sunrise. You heard the website. You can go and check out more from Mr. Roditis, and I will see you next time.